This episode is brought to you by ARX. You want to be a successful strength training studio owner. The problem is you aren't able to deliver the safest, most efficient and effective workouts, making it harder for you to attract and retain clients, which makes you feel frustrated. I understand that it can be difficult to differentiate your business without the right tools. ARX's breakthrough adaptive resistance technology uses patented motorized resistance and computer software to give you and your clients the perfect workout every single time. BioFit founder John Zarbok says that ARX is clearly the superior tool to deliver the exercise stimulus. My clients are seeing insane improvements in weeks, not months. I could not fathom running my business without ARX. So here's how you get started. Number one, go to arxfit.com/HIB to get $500 off your ARX machines. Number two, book a call with the ARX sales team. And number three, learn how ARX can help you grow your strength training business. Go to arxfit.com/HIB so you can stop struggling to attract and retain clients and start to grow your strength training business with confidence. All right, Lawrence Snill here, and welcome back to highintensitybusiness.com, the podcast where we discuss high-intensity strength training and provide you with the tools, the tactics, and the strategies to help you grow your strength training business. Are you struggling to grow your strength training business? If so, join HIT Business Membership, where we provide how-to guides from successful strength training business owners to help you grow your business with confidence. And you can join now by going to highintensitybusiness.com and clicking the Join Membership button. This is episode 360. And today's topic is part 4 of the High Intensity Training Fundamentals series with Tim Ryan. Tim is a master super slow instructor and owner of Strong Life Personal Training in Barrington, Illinois. You can contact Tim to learn all about his services to help studio owners and personal trainers, including workshops, mentoring, and seminars by going to his website, which is stronglifetraining.com, or emailing Tim directly to info@stronglifetraining.com. Tim, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Lawrence, how are you doing?
I'm very good. It's good to see you, and I'm excited to resume this series with you. So you wanted to just wrap up a few points on movement speed before we went into some of the other topics. So take it away.
All right. Yeah. So in our last podcast, we did, spend a lot of time talking about the speed of movement and sort of the rationale behind it and the pros and some of the cons and so forth. And I just wanted to finish up a thought, and that's going to lead us also into our discussion for today, where we're going to get into, talking about time under load and time to concentric failure and determining the proper weight load when you train and those types of things. But with regard to this movement speed, so we already established that obviously the positive benefits and the reasons for why we should be training in a slow and controlled fashion. And but the point that I wanted to make today as we start our discussion is a concept that I've kind of struggled to put a good name to it, but basically a concept that I call training slow unavoidably versus training slow intentionally. And what I mean by that is, first off, consider that everything we do through exercise is a volitional or a voluntary or volitional type of experience. Okay. So in other words, we can talk all about the physics behind slow movement and how it reduces the force and makes it safer and reduces the momentum and more evenly applies the load to the muscles and all of these good things. But sort of the fly in the ointment, so to speak, or the potential problem or limitation with that is the fact that we're dealing with human beings with certain level of skills and ability, certain level of motivation, certain level of tolerance, for exercise and for the discomfort that's associated with the exercise. And you've got all these things going on, and at the root of it, you've got an individual that has to intentionally perform in such a way, and they have to be able to control their muscles, and they have to be able to put forth a certain amount of effort, and everybody's got varying degrees of ability in those areas. So one of the problems is that I did highlight in our last discussion was this idea that when you give somebody instructions to move slow, particularly, to barely move, just barely start the movement into motion. Now try to keep that just barely moving, those types of instructions. With a lot of people, that will cause them to be passive. In other words, the way that they think that they barely move is to not produce a lot of effort or not produce a lot of internal muscle force or output of muscle force. So in other words, they try to control their speed by being very passive and not really pushing hard. Okay, that leads to basically not being able to move a meaningful load, and they end up, you have to give them a very light load in order to match their passivity in their low level of effort. Okay, when you give them a heavier load, then all of a sudden they are, they're not, either they act like they can't move it, or it creates a lot of discrepancies where they push for a second or two and stop, and then push for a second or two or stop. And you have this sort of disjointed or segmented movement, and sort of this off-oning that we call, kind of turning the muscle on and off rather than sustaining, a good deep contraction. So when I talk about this concept of moving slow unavoidably versus moving slow intentionally, here's what I'm talking about. All right. Let's consider the fact that whatever weight load you're lifting, all right, in order to move that load, you need to produce a level of force or apply a level of force that's higher than the load. So, just a simple discussion, if you're trying to move 100-pound load, you have to apply more than 100 pounds of force against that in order to get it to move. Now, let's just say, it takes at least 101 pounds of force to move 100 pounds. And, ignoring the fact that maybe there's some friction there, which would make, you have to make a little more force than that. But just, theoretically, to move that 100 pounds, you need to produce at least 101 pounds of force to set it into motion. All right. Now, when you do that, if you apply something like, 101 pounds of force against 100, that load is going to barely move. All right. It's going to just creep along at a snail's pace. All right. And if you continue to just keep that same level of force applied to it, you do it, consistently, then you're going to have a very slow moving, smooth, consistent movement of that load. All right. But let's consider another scenario. All right. In order to move that load faster, you have to provide a higher level of force. All right. So let's say instead of 101 pounds of force, you applied 150 pounds of force. All right. Now that 100-pound load is going to accelerate. It's going to move at a faster rate. So you're going to have a faster speed of movement. All right. And as we follow out this progression, the more force you apply to it, all of that force above and beyond what's necessary to move the load. So in this case, all of the force above 100 pounds, the higher that force is that's applied, the faster that load is going to move, the greater the rate of acceleration is going to be. All right. So let's consider the implications of this. When you see somebody doing very fast reps, so you go into a typical gym, and most people are probably lifting the weight in 1 second and lowering it back down in 1 second, or sometimes even faster with some of these people. But to move a load through a range of motion in 1 second, that takes a lot of force above and beyond the load that you're lifting in order to cause that level of acceleration. And we talked a little bit last time about this force plate experiment where what happens with that and so forth. So, somebody that's lifting, let's say 100-pound load in 1 second, they may be applying 200, 250, 300 pounds of force, at least generating that much force initially to set that weight into motion and accelerate it. Okay. So consider this. If somebody is generating that much force and moving that load that quickly, all right, that means that they are able to produce quite a bit more force than the load that they're lifting. All right. And I'm going to come back to that in a second. Now, on the flip side, somebody that's moving the load very slowly is applying a level of force just barely above the level of the load. Okay. So obviously, from the safety standpoint that we talked about last time, that's a safer thing because we are just applying enough force to move the load. We're not generating any excessive level of force. We're not exposing our bodies to any more force than's necessary to move that load. So that's a good thing. But when we start to get into this discussion here of sort of time under load and determining the proper weight load that you should be training with, this concept that I've just introduced is very important, all right? Because we want to be training at a load that challenges our muscles to a very high level. And we want to be able to train with a load that is meaningful enough that it induces fatigue and ultimately muscle failure within a determined amount of time, okay, within a reasonable amount of time. All right, so keep this in mind now as I start to discuss this concepts of time under load and ultimately determining the proper weight load, okay? So let's just define our terms first. Time under load would be a description of the entire amount of time that the muscle is exposed to the load or ultimately to the exercise. All right. And this can be characterized by placing tension on the muscle. All right. So some people refer to this concept as time under tension. Time under load is the same thing, just a different term. But the idea here is that from the moment you begin to apply that load or tension against the muscle, that clock starts running, okay? And you perform your exercise, and that time under load clock is running until which time you complete the exercise, set the load down, release the tension from the muscle. So that entire time period is called time under load. Now, there's a different concept that we call, time to failure, or more specifically, time to concentric failure, because obviously what we're doing when we're contracting the muscle, shortening the muscle, and lifting the load, that's concentric muscle contraction, all right? And then the eccentric is when you're lowering the load back down. Okay, Nautilus used to call this positive work and negative work. Positive work is when you're lifting the load and contracting the muscle. Negative work is when you're lengthening the muscle back and lowering the load. Okay, but specifically, time to concentric failure would be from the moment you start the exercise until you hit the point of that momentary muscle failure where that rep fails, or where you get halfway through the rep, let's say, and you can no longer complete the repetition, okay? That would be concentric failure. So notice that the time under load is greater than the time to concentric failure, because you may train to concentric failure and then you're still under load. Maybe you're halfway up with the rep and you're still applying force. You're still attempting to contract that muscle and lift the load, and you may be pushing against that immovable load for several seconds. And then after that, you're going to now lower the load back down to the point where you end the exercise. So even after you reach concentric failure, that time under load clock is still running, okay?
So
those are the two concepts.
Can I ask a question on that quickly?
Sure.
I don't know, we're going to get into tracking later in this series, but would you track both of those? So you'd have like two stopwatches and you'd be tracking time under load and time to concentric failure?
Well, I used to do that. And, I was real particular. I used to do three things. I used to do the time to concentric failure, the total time under load, and the reps.
Okay. Wow. Wow. Yeah.
Now I no longer do all that because it is kind of burdensome, and some of that stuff maybe isn't as critical to have all three of those. But I liked to have all three of those because number one, knowing with the load you're lifting, how long did it take you to reach that concentric failure? All right, and that's really probably the most important thing, particularly for measuring your progress, because if you lifted 100 pounds today and you failed in 90 seconds, and then next workout you lifted 100 pounds and it took you 105 seconds to reach failure, then that's an indication of progress. Or vice versa, if you add a couple pounds and you still get 90 seconds out of it or something. So that's one of the key indicators of measuring your progress. But for a while, and I no longer do this, but one of the super slow techniques was something called thorough inroad technique. And, Ken Hutchins used to say that exercise begins at failure. All right. The concept there was that you train to failure, but then once you hit that failure wall, you would continue to exert force and keep pushing for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. You would come back down to the start and attempt another repetition, get it as far as you could, and push for another 10 or 15 seconds. You would proceed to do this until you couldn't even budge the weight off the bottom. All right. So there may be, in that case, 30 or 45 seconds of continuous work and time under load after the point of failure. Okay. So in those days, that's why I was recording both of those times, because I wanted to know how long did it take for them to hit failure, but how long were they in total working that muscle for? Okay. Now, today's not the discussion for this, but I no longer believe that thorough inroad technique is either necessary or even advantageous in any way. It probably is a detriment, but at any rate, that kind of explains why I was doing those times. And then the idea of knowing how many reps they did, that kind of gave me an idea of what their pace was, how many reps did they do within a given amount of time. And that would kind of give you an indication of how long each rep took, so.
Hard to know that though, right? Depending on how long turnarounds took and if there was pauses at max contraction, and that could vary at each rep, right? So that's
tricky. And there you got those kind of things, and then you've also got situations where people can milk the clock. Sometimes
I used to be so guilty of that.
What they do is they maybe lift the concentric or the positive lifting phase too quickly. They spend a little time pausing or doing an excessively slow turnaround, then they really milk the clock on the negative. And, you have sort of an uneven balance between the positive and the negative. And according to the clock, they maybe took a good length of time to perform each repetition, but it wasn't very uniform. It wasn't consistent, and you get all kinds of funny business going on. So at any rate, we know those two concepts of time to concentric failure, time under load. But here's an important point, and I'm gonna bring all these concepts together as we move forward. But let's talk about what is the ideal time for specifically that time to concentric failure.
Just before you get there, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, sure.
And just to clarify, because I love that we're keeping this really basic. We're almost keeping it to a level where if someone was just tuning in who had no idea what high intensity training is, that they could follow along, which I think we should definitely continue at that level. But just to clarify, TCF, time to concentric failure, is that the same as muscular failure and the same as momentary muscular failure?
Yeah, I would say it is.
Yeah.
Okay. And basically just this term failure, some people associate that with a negative connotation that, oh, you failed. And,
Yeah.
and clients sometimes take it that way too. Like, oh gosh, they'll hit failure and they go, oh, I'm sorry, Tim, I just didn't have it today. I'm like, what are you sorry about? That's exactly what was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
You should only be sorry if you didn't give it your maximal effort. If you gave up and quit, okay, then you should be sorry. But if you trained to failure and you gave it 100% effort and so forth, that's what's supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the all we're really describing is as you perform each repetition, your muscle strength is diminishing. All right, fatigue is setting in, and little by little, your ability to produce force is diminishing. All right. At some point, the output of force from that muscle reaches a level that it's no longer sufficient to move the load. So despite the fact that internally you may be giving a maximal effort, that muscle strength has diminished or fatigued to a level that it doesn't have enough force to produce movement. So you hit that wall, you hit that point where you can no longer move it. Although you can sustain that contraction and maybe keep the load in place for a period of time, still pushing on it. Eventually, if you continue to push and push and push, that muscle strength will fatigue to a deeper level, and now you won't even be able to stop the weight from coming down. That negative will ensue, and you won't be able to stop it, okay? So that's what we're talking about, is whether you call that time to failure, time to concentric failure, momentary muscular failure, that all describes the same event, okay? So now this idea of, what sort of time frame should that occur in, okay? Because in years past, everything was defined by repetition count. So you have these exercise prescriptions where somebody says, okay, you should do 3 sets of 10 reps each. Or, Nautilus used to say, pick a weight that you can lift 8 to 12 times, all right? With the idea there that, the load you're lifting, you should at least get 8 reps out of it before that failure occurs. But you should not be able to do more than 12 reps before failure occurs. So somewhere in between 8 to 12 reps, that failure would occur. Okay. And obviously there's all sorts of recommendations, whether somebody says, oh, do 4 to 6 rep range, or 8 to 12, or 12 to 15, or, you've got all these different recommendations. And it used to be defined by those repetition counts, but now I'd like to think we're a little more sophisticated in the sense that we're using a stopwatch, we're recording the time, we're looking at that time to concentric failure. So, what is the best time to failure, or what is the best time frame that this failure should occur in? And here we do have a little bit of science, or we have a little bit of physiology, which is going to help us determine this, okay? And I know that, there's been these conversations, these discussions of whether it's the rep range or whether it's the time under load, time to concentric failure, what is that ideal time frame? And there's even been some studies recently that kind of have come to the conclusion that, at least in terms of repetition ranges, it doesn't really matter what repetition range you use as long as you reach failure, okay? And I would agree with that, to a point. As far as it goes, that may be true. But the first thing I would say is that, well, if you don't train with a heavy enough load, you're not going to reach failure. So yeah. This doesn't give you license to just lift any old load you want and then just keep going until you reach failure, because if the weight's not heavy enough, there's not going to be failure. You're going to sort of turn it into an aerobic exercise where you're just going to keep going as if you were jogging or something like that. Mm-hmm. So the load does matter, okay? But the other problem with some of that research is that they do things and they say, okay, we had one group do 6 to 8 reps to failure, and we had one group do 8 to 12, and one group do 12 to 15, and one group do 15 to 20. And all those groups, as long as they trained to failure, they got about the same results from the training. So therefore, it doesn't matter. All right. Well, one thing I think you need to look at the details a little closer, because you have to pay attention to what was the speed of movement, and ultimately with those rep ranges, what time to concentric failure resulted from those rep ranges. Okay, and if they were doing relatively conventional movement speeds, maybe lifting the weight in 1 second and lowering it in 1 second, or even doing the Nautilus type of 2-4 protocol, all those rep ranges result in a fairly low level of time to concentric failure. And just to kind of set some examples, in a typical gym, in a typical person exercising, like I highlighted, they're probably lifting the weight in 1 second and lowering it in 1 second. All right. So think about this. If they did 10 reps, 1 second up, 1 second down, that's only 20 seconds to do 10 reps. All right. Now, let's say they did 20 reps, 1 second up, 1 second down. That's only 40 seconds. Okay. So now, if they reached failure in 20 seconds, or whether they reached failure in 40 seconds, or conversely, whether they did 10 reps or 20 reps, that research study might show that, 10 and 20 reps produce the same result. Okay. But you're only comparing, 20 seconds time to failure versus 40 seconds.
Yeah, you make a good point. I can't remember seeing in the design methods of a lot of studies the cadences, the movement speeds. They're not often even mentioned, are they? Yeah. Right. And this is why I know a lot of our community have a real issue with a lot of the research out there on resistance training. Yeah,
exactly. And I think talking about rep ranges and saying what rep ranges work or don't work is meaningless without defining what their movement speed or their rep cadence was, and ultimately what the time to concentric failure was. Okay. Mm-hmm. But even just moving on with this concept, okay, let's say you're doing, a 2-4 protocol. You're lifting it in 2 and lowering it in 4. So that's taking about 6 seconds per rep. Well, the Nautilus recommendation was to do 8 to 12 reps. So 8 times 6 is 48. Okay. So if you did 8 reps to failure, that took 48 seconds. If you did 12 reps to failure, that took 1:12 or 72 seconds. So even in that, you're talking about 48 to 72 seconds of time to failure. Okay. Still a relatively, reasonable amount of time. And even if you do a higher rep range, 12 to 15 or something, you're still going to reach failure maybe somewhere between a minute and 1:30 or so. So you could say, well, whether you train to failure in 20 seconds or 40 seconds or 60 or 72 or 90, that all kind of works about the same. Okay. Where I have a problem, though, is that, again, going back to this idea of not defining what the cadence was, or not measuring what the time to failure was. Let's say somebody's doing super slow, and they're doing 10 seconds up and 10 seconds down, 20 seconds per rep. Okay. Now, 5 super slow reps is going to take 1:40. 10 super slow reps is going to take 3 minutes and 30 seconds. 20 super slow reps is going to take 6 minutes and 30 seconds. Okay, so now you're going to tell me that it doesn't matter whether you do 5 reps or whether you do 20 reps. You're talking about a difference of 1:40 and 6.5 minutes. Okay, that's crazy. Now you're talking about a huge difference in the time under load, time to failure. But compare that to conventional training. You got one guy doing 10 reps in 20 seconds. You got a super slow guy doing 10 reps in 3.5 minutes. Are you going to tell me that there's no difference between 20 seconds and 3 minutes and 30 seconds? I mean, you could be all over the map. So I think what happens with some of these studies is that they're pretty much generally comparing, the more conventional movement speeds. And with the rep ranges that they're comparing, they're probably ending up with a time to concentric failure of anywhere from 20 or 30 seconds on the low end to maybe a minute and a half on the high end. And they're arriving at a conclusion that, anywhere in that range doesn't really make too much difference. But that doesn't translate to mean that if you were doing super slow and you did 20 super slow reps, that's the same as 20 1 second up, 1 second down reps. So I think you really have to look at more of the details. And if those details weren't studied for or controlled for, you're kind of arriving at conclusions that aren't necessarily valid. Okay. And this brings us to this idea of, okay, with all these possible ranges of time and reps and rep counts and different speed or cadence of reps, where should we be in terms of this time to concentric failure? And this is where you have to kind of bring the science or the physiology in and consider what we're dealing with. Okay. The way muscles work is that they obviously need energy to produce muscle contraction and produce force. And that energy is governed by a couple different energy systems. And we've probably all heard these terms anaerobic and aerobic. All right. And what the terms mean is aerobic means with oxygen, and anaerobic means without oxygen. And what these terms are referring to is not that the exercise itself, like the body is not consuming oxygen when you exercise, or it is. What it's referring to is the energy system, the energy pathway that is delivering energy to the muscles, how that energy is being produced, whether it's relying upon oxygen to produce the energy or whether it's relying not on oxygen to produce the energy. So what you have is this aerobic and anaerobic referring to how the muscle is getting its energy to produce that muscle contraction and to perform the exercise. So we've all said, and we understand that strength training, weight training is an anaerobic exercise, because what's taking place there is that the length of time that it takes to perform a set of an exercise and train to failure, that is relying upon the anaerobic energy system to fuel that work, okay? Versus when you're doing a very long duration, particularly steady state, like you're going for a jog and jogging 5 miles, that becomes more of an aerobic exercise because it's relying upon the aerobic energy system to deliver that energy to the muscles, okay? And at the root of it, here's how this works. The anaerobic energy system is capable of producing energy very quickly and providing that quick energy for intense exercise and for high level effort exercise. So the advantage of the anaerobic energy system is you can access it instantaneously and deliver that energy to the muscles very quickly to fuel that high intensity muscular work. On the downside, there's a limit to how much energy that system can provide. In other words, it runs out of fuel quickly, all right? And essentially, within about 90 seconds, you're kind of exhausting the anaerobic energy system, which means if you're performing intense exercise and you're using up fuel, you're using up that energy at such a quick pace that you will run out of energy within, roughly 90 seconds.
How did you land on 90 seconds?
Exactly. Well, that's if you go to the physiology textbooks and you look at the capacities of this anaerobic energy system, that's how much capacity it has before it sort of runs out. Okay.
This episode is brought to you by ARX. These are the most intense exercise machines I've ever used. I remember how fast a pull-down exercise took me to muscular failure and beyond. On the final negative or eccentric excursion, my tank was practically empty, but the adaptive resistance enabled me to continue to perform work until the predetermined end of the set. This experience was very profound and made me realize how effective ARX is in helping clients reach a high level of intensity in their workouts and ultimately produce the best results. I also love how ARX measures and tracks range of motion, rep cadence, total output and time, and more with real-time audio and visual feedback. These features are powerful sales and retention tools to help you convert and keep more clients. As a listener of the High Intensity Business podcast, ARX is offering you $500 off your machines. Just go to arxfit.com/HIB to book a call with the ARX sales team to learn how ARX can revolutionize and grow your fitness business. Again, go to arxfit.com/HIB. And now back to the episode. But obviously, did they use an example? Like, did they use sprinters? Like, because I think sprinters, like, I don't know, can you sprint for 9? That's probably actually not possible. I don't know. But I think sprinters normally sprint for 10 to 15 seconds, don't they? But I'm just curious because if the weight's too light, then like you were saying, then how do we? it just seems a little bit arbitrary to me. I'm trying to understand how they landed on that.
Yeah. Well, first off, keep in mind that there's sort of a mixture of stuff going on here. That you've got basically, and again, we're trying to keep this relatively simple, but at the base level, you've got the ATP system that's delivering this energy to the muscles, and then you've got the ATP and lactic acid and mixture of things coming in, and then ultimately you've got the aerobic energy system. So it's never like a clearly defined point. I mean, if you do something where an all-out sprint, let's say like 100-meter dash, okay, that's going to be pretty much just pure anaerobic burst of energy, okay? But there's a continuum here where, depending on the intensity of the exercise and the level of effort, okay, you may initially use sort of that ATP pure anaerobic system, but then you start to bring in a mixture of the aerobic system and a combination of the two going on. But this is one of the things now that I'm building to. When we look at the aerobic energy system, that machinery, that aerobic system, can't supply energy instantaneously or very quickly. It takes a little bit of time for that machinery to get up and running and to start to process energy, okay? So what happens is during the initial, minute to 90 seconds worth of exercise, your body's primarily relying on that anaerobic system. But then if you're working at such a intensity level that you can get to 90 seconds and sustain that work, the aerobic energy system starts to come online, starts to produce energy, and starts to supply energy.
So that could be that 90 seconds. Then I know it differs. Probably there's some nuance to that, and it differs depending on individuals. But you could define it by saying that so long as there is a force that is a relatively high intensity, or that could be like a moderate heavy load or an all-out sprint, that's what that 90 seconds is based on. Basically, it's like that's going to signal to use the energy stored locally in the muscle and use and utilize the anaerobic pathway maximally, and therefore that's going to last 90 seconds. Is that kind of what we're saying?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to describe is the fact that there's a continuum to this whole process, that the more intense the exercise is, the higher level of effort, the more demanding the exercise is, then the faster rate of energy expenditure there is, okay? But there's a whole continuum that different levels of intensity, different levels of effort, different level of demand from the activity or the exercise you're doing, that determines how quickly and how much energy your body needs, okay? So the body is going to deliver that energy if it needs it extremely quickly. If there's this really high burst of high intensity, effort, like in a sprint, 100-meter dash, where you're literally going all out, that's going to be relying on that anaerobic energy system to deliver that energy as fast as possible to those muscles to fuel that intensity. But then as we go lower down the continuum to something that's not quite as intense, okay, then it'll start to bring in a mixture of some of the anaerobic energy system, some of the aerobic system kind of thing. And then if we go to even a lower level where maybe we're just a slow jog or we're walking, okay, then it's not as intense. The body doesn't need the energy as quickly, so it can allow the aerobic system to sort of kick in and deliver that long, slow energy to the muscles, okay? So it all depends on the demands of the activity, how quickly the body needs the energy, and it's going to kind of involve those different systems. So there's always going to be a mixture depending on that whole continuum and what level you're working at, okay? But the key point that we need to focus on is that let's apply this now to sort of the way the muscles work and the contraction of the muscles. All right, when you go to perform any movement, any activity, your body is going to recruit the level of muscle fibers that it needs to perform that task. So if I'm going to reach out onto my desk and pick up a pencil, I don't need very much muscle. I don't need to produce very much force in order to lift that pencil. So, I'm barely going to engage my muscles, all right? But then as you lift heavier objects, all right, your body needs to recruit more muscle fibers to overcome that and produce a level of force that can lift that heavier object, okay? And again, we have a continuum here that the heavier the load is, the more muscle fibers you have to activate in order to lift that load, okay? And as we perform an exercise, so as we get into an exercise machine or as we pick up a weight, a barbell, whatever, your body is going to sense that load and it's going to activate a level of muscle fibers necessary to lift that object, okay? Whatever that happens to be, as you perform repetitions of an exercise, if the load is sufficient enough, you're going to start to fatigue the muscles, all right? And that level of force, those activated muscle fibers, those muscle fibers that are being used to lift that load, some of those fibers are going to start to fatigue, all right? As they fatigue, your body's going to recruit more muscle fibers into action, all right? So it's going to call in for extra help because due to that fatigue, your ability to produce force is diminishing. So now you need a little more help. So more muscle fibers are going to come online to start to help you to continue to produce enough force to lift that load. And there's going to be this progressive recruitment. As muscle fibers fatigue, then some of the fresh, rested, unused fibers are going to activate, kick into action, and start to assist you, okay? So you're going to progressively tap in deeper and deeper to using those muscle fibers, activating those muscle fibers and using them. Ultimately, as you continue those repetitions and as that fatigue continues to build, more and more of these muscle fibers come online until which time you have no more left to recruit, all right? And then you're going to be able to sustain the exercise until which point that all of those working fibers fatigue to a level that there's not enough force production left to overcome the load, and then you hit failure, okay? But what we're dealing with here is with strength training and with what we're intending to do through the exercise that we do, we want to activate all of those muscle fibers that we possibly can. We want to use that entire muscle as deeply as possible. We would ideally like to recruit 100% of our muscle fibers. And we want to bring that level of fatigue to such that we reach muscle failure. Okay. So the idea of training to failure is that by training to failure, you're sort of optimally recruiting and engaging all of your available muscle fibers and bringing them to a point of fatigue to stimulate, the improvements that we're after, right? So we need to have that occur. We don't want to just use half of our muscle fibers. The theory being that, well, you're only going to stimulate and benefit the muscle fibers that are being used. So if you're doing an exercise where you're only using half your muscle fiber capacity, then you're really only getting, half of your muscle fibers stimulated for improvement. If you're evolving a higher level, you're getting deeper into that muscle and you're getting more stimulation at a deeper level. Okay. So ideally, we would desire to activate and stimulate 100% of our available muscle fibers. And to do that requires, as we've been discussing, training to failure. All right. So tying this back into the time under load, we need to work within the anaerobic energy system, and we need to hit failure before that aerobic energy system kicks in. And here's the reason why. All right. We talked about this capacity of the anaerobic energy system to supply energy to the muscles. And when there's that intense effort and where there's a high rate of fatigue, you're using and kind of completely exhausting that anaerobic energy system, bringing all of those muscle fibers into action and exhausting them, hitting failure before before the aerobic system is allowed to kick in. Okay, because here's what happens when the aerobic system kicks in is that if you're working at an intensity level, or the load you're lifting and the effort required and the force required, if you're just using kind of a moderate load to the point that you can sustain that longer than 90 seconds, that aerobic energy system starts kicking in and supplying energy. And now you're not going to fatigue those muscles very efficiently, because as we know, that aerobic energy system can provide real long-term energy. Those muscles can keep contracting over and over and over again because the level of intensity is not high enough to fatigue them very quickly. And that aerobic system can keep up with that rate of work and continually keep supplying those muscle fibers energy to keep going. And that's why somebody can, run a marathon. Yeah. Because those muscle fibers are not hitting failure. You're not fatiguing. You're fatiguing to some degree, obviously, but you're not utilizing 100% capacity of your muscle fibers. You're not bringing those muscle fibers to failure because you're working at a more moderate effort, and that aerobic system is continually supplying those muscle fibers with energy to keep going. All right. But here's a key point. If that's happening, all right. So in other words, you're utilizing that aerobic energy system to keep supplying that energy to the muscles. Those muscle fibers are not fatiguing, and you're not being forced to recruit deeper into the muscle fiber pool to keep recruiting more and more muscle fibers into action. Okay. You're just using a very low level of your capacity, and you keep repeating and reusing those same muscle fibers over and over again. In other words, there's a regeneration of the energy and a regeneration of those same muscle fibers over and over and over again, rather than this previous scenario where you're progressively recruiting deeper and deeper and deeper into the muscle fiber pool. Okay. Mm-hmm. So to make a long story short, if we don't hit failure within about 90 seconds, then we're losing the efficiency of recruiting muscle fibers and bringing them to failure and to a deep level of fatigue. We're allowing that aerobic energy system to kick in and start to regenerate these muscle fibers over and over again, rather than doing the deep fiber recruitment that we're after. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it matters how long your set takes. It matters how long it takes you to reach concentric failure. And the bottom line is that if you're using a weight load that you can lift for 3 minutes, all right, which a lot of super slow people do, okay, you're using such a light weight load that you can sustain that work for 3 minutes, you're getting into the aerobic energy system. It's becoming a quasi aerobic exercise, okay? Not totally, but you're kicking in that aerobic energy system and you're regenerating those muscle fibers, and you're just reusing the same muscle fibers without tapping deeper and deeper into
okay. So if you think they're going for like 3 minutes, they're just not getting at the highest order motor unit muscle fiber.
Exactly.
And then ultimately stimulating best results. That's the issue there.
Right. And what you've got is, I mean, consider a set, if you're going to go for 3.5 minutes or something, okay, that means those initial reps are fairly easy. If you're lifting a weight that you can lift for 3.5 minutes, then that first minute or two of the exercise is not very demanding. All right. Because proof positive is you're not fatiguing very quickly. You're going on and on and on, and you can last 3.5 minutes. And you're starting to kick in this aerobic energy system. You're regenerating the fibers. You're not continually progressively recruiting, and you're just going on and on. Okay. So we need to lift a load that is going to fatigue us quick enough that we recruit through those muscle fibers and bring all of those muscle fibers into action, and we reach that state of failure before that aerobic energy system is allowed to kick into action and then keep supplying that long-term energy. So in other words, long story short, we need to work within the anaerobic energy system, because that is where your muscles are going to fatigue and force your body to recruit into those deeper level muscle fibers to continue to produce force as that fatigue occurs. All right. Yeah. So whatever your repetition cadence is, whatever the speed of movement is you're using, whatever the rep range you're using, I believe you need to be hitting failure within 90 seconds, or else you're losing a lot of efficiency and you're not as effectively stimulating the muscles as you could. So these ideas of these 2, 3, 4 minute sets that a lot of super slow instructors have their clients doing is just not very productive. You have to get the loads heavier, okay? And you have to work at a higher level of effort, a higher level of intensity that's going to fatigue you quicker and fatigue you within that anaerobic energy system and force that full recruitment of all those available muscle fibers. All right. So now this brings us back to my original concept of this training slow unavoidably versus training slow intentionally. And here's what I mean by that, is that if you're going to train slow intentionally, in other words, somebody told you to move slow, and now you're going to just be very gentle and passive and train in a slow fashion, then you're not going to be essentially lifting a heavy enough weight that is really going to challenge you, all right? Because of that passivity, because of that modest effort, because of that intentional desire to move slow, you're not putting out a high level of force, and you're essentially holding back and lifting a lighter load than you otherwise could handle, and you're intentionally moving it slow, but you're capable of much more, okay? Which means that the intensity is going to be lower, the rate of fatigue is going to be lower, and you're going to get into these problems where you're doing a 3 or a 4 minute set of an exercise. All right. Now, in contrast, if you lift a heavier load, obviously it's going to be a higher level of effort. It's going to require the recruitment of a higher level of muscle fibers, and it's going to be a higher intensity, a higher rate of fatigue. Okay. And it's going to fatigue you quicker. You're going to hit failure sooner. All right. But remember that concept I started with originally, where, if you're lifting a 100-pound load and you apply 101 pounds of force against it, it's barely going to move. If you apply 200 or 300 pounds of force against that load, it's going to move very quickly. All that extra force is going to accelerate the load. Okay. So let's consider something. If your muscles are capable of putting out 300 pounds of force, and you're choosing to only lift 100 pounds, all right, and you're moving slow intentionally, which means you're voluntarily just putting out slightly more than 100 pounds of force, okay, you're going to move very slowly. It's going to look nice and pretty. You're going to do a nice, slow, smooth rep, and your instructor is going to think it's great, okay? But here's the problem. If your muscles have the ability to put out 300 pounds of force and you're only choosing to put out 100, there's a big discrepancy between what you're capable of and what you're actually voluntarily doing. Okay. So in that case, you're just simply not using your full capacity of your muscles. You're not going to be working at a high enough level that you're going to fatigue in a sufficient rate of time and reach failure within that anaerobic energy system. And again, tap through those muscle fibers and recruit all of those. Okay. In contrast, this idea of moving slow unavoidably, what I mean by that is that you should be lifting a load that challenges you at a very high level of your ability. All right. And I'm just plugging numbers in here to illustrate, but if you're capable of producing 300 pounds of force with your muscle, you don't want to be lifting 100 pounds. You want to be lifting much closer to 300. All right. So if you choose to, again, you're capable of 300 pounds of force output of the muscle, you want to be lifting maybe 250 pounds. Okay. So that you have to recruit a very high level of your muscle fibers. And then that load is going to be heavy enough that it challenges you, and the rate of fatigue is great enough that it forces your body to recruit through those muscle fibers that are remaining and bring everything on the line and bring you to failure within this optimal time range that we're describing. Okay. And what I mean by moving slow unavoidably is that if you choose a weight load that's closer to your true capacity, then you don't have enough force capability to accelerate that load. That load is going to move slow unavoidably because you don't have the ability to produce enough force above and beyond that load you're using to cause acceleration. All right. You see where I'm getting at there?
Yep, absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Yep.
So I think what happens too many times with people is that they choose too light of a weight load. They intentionally move slow, which is great and it's safe and all that. But because they're choosing too light of a weight load, they're able to go on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
Their sets go on too long. The aerobic energy system kicks in. They keep regenerating and reusing the same fibers. They're not efficiently tapping in and recruiting all of these muscle fibers into action. And it just loses its efficiency and effectiveness. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I understand why people choose the lighter weight loads. One of them, I keep going back to this point, is that if somebody's been told to intentionally move slow, all right, and they become passive as a result of that, and they become not willing to put forth a lot of effort, they simply don't think they have the ability to move a heavier load because they're really not using all of their available muscle. Yeah. They're not producing that effort at a high enough level to lift a heavier load. Okay, so they're just intentionally holding back, moving slow and picture perfect. But internally, physiologically, they're not really doing intense work and really activating those muscles at a higher level. All right. Mm-hmm. Now, on the flip side, when you give a person a heavier load, again, if they're still under this idea that they should be intentionally moving slow, and they're not putting forth a great effort, they're not going to be able to lift a heavier load. Okay. It's not because they don't have the ability to lift a heavier load. It's just because they're not tapping in and using that ability because they're passive. All right. And the other problems that arise is that when you lift a meaningful load that's closer to your true capacity, it's you feel that load. I mean, it's hard work. It's hard work to move that load. You're activating that muscle at a higher level. You're feeling a much higher level of tension or load or strain upon that muscle. And it's uncomfortable. It's hard work. And consequently, many people, struggle with trying to maintain that high enough level of effort and to endure that very high level of tension or strain. And they start misbehaving. All right. They start to push for a second or two and then they back off, or they jerk at the weight, or they twist and they squirm and they do this segmenting and this off-oning, and they do all these.
It's like this fight or flight response kicks in.
Fight or flight response.
It's trying to tame that and coach it out of them.
Right. So it's very difficult for most people to sustain a very high level, intense, high tension, high strain repetition continuously without letting that muscle relax. Everybody wants to push for a second or two and then relax, and then push for a second or two and relax, and you get this disjointed, uneven movement. All right. So it takes a skilled person and a motivated person to train with a meaningful load, sustain that long-term muscle contraction, and perform those repetitions without letting that tension release from the muscle. So I think what happens a lot of times is instructors witness all of these bad behaviors, witness all of these form discrepancies. And in order to clean up the form discrepancies, they lighten the load so the person will behave. All right. They get the behavior modification that they're after, but now they've given the person a load that's not meaningful enough to challenge them and bring them to failure within the requisite time under load, or time to failure.
How would you overcome that then? Just curious, if someone like, would it be about getting the load just right, not reducing it too much, or would you keep the load the same? And I know it varies massively depending on the individual, and just coach them through the form. Because I agree with you. If you reduce it too much, and then it might not be that effective.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, this is the age-old problem, and I don't have all the answers to this. It's extremely hard work with some people, and this is where it comes down to sort of the art of exercise instruction. That you can have all the head knowledge in the world, and you can know all the physiology and the physics, and you could know exactly how an exercise should be performed and what you would like to see, but the question is, how do you get the client to conform to that and to do the things that you ideally want them to do, and to have their behavior and their performance match what we want to see? Okay. And this is hard. And you deal with these issues of people that there's a whole range of limitations here. You've got what we call this motor control issue. And that's just the ability for, their mind and their nervous system to activate and control the muscle contraction. All right. And some of that is sort of a genetic thing. Some people just have better control, better activation of these things than other people. Some of it is a skill acquisition. Okay, that over time, somebody that has more experience, somebody that's been an athlete, somebody that's lifted weights, throughout the course of their lifetime, is going to have had a better development of their skills, a better development of their motor control. Okay. But some of it comes down to just plain and simple, how focused, how motivated that client is, how willing to perform that client is, their tolerance for, putting up with the discomfort of exercise, putting up with that feeling of straining upon their body, that high level of tension applied to their muscles. Just, there's all these different factors, and it's very difficult to control for all this. And I think I think the greatest limitation on an individual's results is themselves. Okay, because many people don't have very much willingness to work extremely hard. They don't have a willingness to endure the discomfort. They don't have a willingness to really deeply contract those muscles at a high level and sustain that contraction and sustain that load and that tension. And, concentrate, put their mind into it, pay attention to what they're doing, give their 100% best effort. You've got such a range of variables, and just most people are not willing to go there and do that. Okay. So consequently, the limitation is how much is the client willing to do? How good is their skills? How good is their motor control? What level of motivation do they have in all of this type of thing? And this really, leads to who you're dealing with and where all those variables lie within that person. But then as an instructor, how do you get that out of them, or how do you teach them and convince them and motivate them to get at these higher levels? And, some people will be easier to do than others. Some people just won't care. Some people are just apathetic. They just want to go through the motions, and they're not interested in learning. They don't have the ability to concentrate. You've just got a whole mess of variables. So, maybe that's something that we could get into in later sessions as we,
I know we're going a little bit off bullet on this one. But I just wanted to reiterate what you said there towards the end. I think there's a massive amount of onus on the trainer to have patience, right?
Yeah.
And the kind of attitude we're trying to instill is 1%. It's like when you get someone in who is really challenging to work with, and it's like it always feels like 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Right?
Yeah, right.
Like you get them to master a certain aspect of form, and then 2 sessions later they're making the same mistake. But the way I looked at it with some of those clients is that if during a workout nothing changed, but let's say they didn't jerk at the last 5% of the seated row, at the end when they got into full contraction, or they kept their shoulders down on the chest press and everything else was the same, I see that as a huge win. And I'll give them huge, great feedback following that workout, because that is improvement. And I think as a trainer, it's just my opinion, I think if you want to be motivated longer term, you've got to have that mindset of, embracing the process and understanding that you're not going to get people to your level ever in many cases. And so it's just trying to get them a little bit better each time. And I think that is key. Otherwise, it's hard to sustain the motivation as a trainer, right? Yeah.
And I think this, as we kind of start to wrap some of this stuff up and tie it all together, certainly I'm not recommending that, the first day you bring a client in, you give them such a heavy load that they can barely budget and, all of that kind of thing. You're obviously starting them at a lower level. Okay. The first step is you need to obviously teach them the fundamentals of what you're asking them to do and what their performance should be. And you need to establish the proper habits and develop the skills with a level of weight that is much more modest, and be able to allow them the opportunity to develop, just like anything else. If you're learning to play the piano or something like that, you have to start at the fundamentals, and you don't start playing Beethoven on the first day, So you're going to start a person at a lighter level. You're going to establish the ground rules. You're going to teach them the fundamentals. You're going to, describe things to them, have them start to perform, give them that feedback and those corrections. And, those early stages are going to be getting them to behave in the proper way, getting them to perform in the proper way. and do things slow, smooth, controlled. Keep your shoulders down, keep your posture set, hold your head and neck still, breathe properly, all of these types of things. All right. And then you're going to establish those patterns and then gradually start to progress them. Okay. And as you progress them, the weight's getting a little bit heavier, things are getting a little more challenging, but you're ramping it up slowly so that you're not going to suddenly make them break form and start to behave badly. Okay. But as you progress along and things get progressively harder and more intense and higher levels of tension on the muscle, higher levels of discomfort from muscle fatigue and higher rates of breathing and effort and all of this kind of stuff going on, this is where things start to break down and where the form starts to degenerate typically, and you start to develop these problems. So part of being an instructor is being able to nip those in the bud right away and continue to teach the person and get them to understand that no matter what, don't change your form, don't change your technique, okay? And you continue to progress through that process. But again, I kind of want to reiterate that the problem that I see is that a lot of trainers become too fixated on having this picture perfect repetition and going slow and having everything perfect and not, doing anything wrong and just having it look picture perfect, that in order to get that behavior, they put the weight too light and they keep the weight too light. And they consequently are not getting the person to reach failure within a proper amount of time. And they're not getting the intensity. They're not getting that higher rate of muscle fiber recruitment and ultimately fatigue and stimulation. So you have something that looks pretty, but is not as productive. All right. So, at some point, there's a balance. The reason why people that, I've witnessed trainees, or, witness people in a gym, or, think of bodybuilders or something like that. You witness one of their workouts, their form by our standards is completely sloppy. They're jerking the weights up and down. They're doing partial ranges of motion. They're twisting and squirming and yelling and just all these theatrics and doing sloppy form. And we would say that that's horrendous. Okay. But somehow they get results from all that. Okay. Part of it might just be the sheer volume, doing so many sets and reps and exercises and things like that, that they eventually get around to causing enough stimulation, whatnot. But part of the reason they're getting results is that somewhere in all of that, they are lifting heavy loads. They are working hard. They are pushing themselves. They are working at very high levels of effort with a significant load and creating enough muscle tension and stress. And, ultimately that intensity and that effort and those heavier loads is what's getting it done, even though their form, their technique would not be to our standards. So
yes, they're just getting to the same place, just really inefficiently and dangerously.
Right. And we could say they're doing it dangerously. They're more likely to get injured. They're not doing it as efficiently. They could get a lot more out of it in less time with less volume. And all those things are true. But I'm just pointing out that ultimately, somewhere in that mix, they are stimulating gains and they are getting results. And I think to some degree, this can be applied to our concept that, ultimately we need to get results for clients, and the client needs to get benefits. They need to achieve their goals and so forth. So you could have somebody that's picture perfect repetition, doing everything right, but they're training with such a light load. In order to gain that behavior, they're training with such a light load that they're not really working very intensely, and they're not getting extremely fatigued from that, and they're not getting as high a level of stress on the muscle that they could. So the workout looks pretty, but it's not very productive. On the other hand, somebody that's maybe not doing everything perfect and maybe a little sloppy at certain points, maybe moving a little bit faster than you'd like, but they are working hard and they are, training with a more meaningful load, then, that's going to be a more productive workout, if not, our absolute ideal. So you got to find this balance. And ultimately what it comes down to is there needs to be hard work. There needs to be intense effort. There needs to be a meaningful load being used, and there needs to be a high level of muscle fiber recruitment and ultimately a high level of fatigue that occurs. And if you don't get that, it doesn't matter how pretty the workout looks. Okay, so ideally we want both. We want proper form and behavior. We want slow, controlled speed of movement. We want good form and technique, but we want that heavy load that's going to render failure, within 90 seconds.
Yeah, just bringing it back to that, the 90 seconds. What do you think is the optimal time window then? Because 90 seconds, is it 60 to 90? Is it 40 to 90? You mentioned we actually do 2-4 is one of our protocols. We do lots of different protocols, but we do 2-4, and we'll do 8 to 12 reps. And it's interesting what you said, how 8 reps works out to be 48 seconds, but it's obviously usually more than that when you include things like pauses and turnarounds, right?
Right, yeah.
And so it usually probably creeps over 60. But yeah, anyway, I'm just curious, what is the actual window of time then, in your opinion? Yeah.
Well, I usually, as I define it, and, based on sort of the physiology and this energy system stuff, I'll usually define it somewhere, let's say 45 to 90 seconds. Okay. But you also, have to consider that on the low end, you need to have enough work. You need to have enough sustained work as a minimal level to get that stimulation. Like, in other words, if you just try to pick up an insurmountable load and you push on it for 5 seconds and stop, you could say, well, I hit failure and I sort of activated all my muscle fibers, but you really didn't do enough work and induce enough, fatigue to cause much of a stimulation. So on the low end, there's sort of a minimal. On the high end, we've already discussed. So I'll usually say 45 to 90 seconds, but in practice, I would say, for most people, I'm aiming for about 60 to 90 seconds. Okay. Because I want them to be able to do enough repetitions. I want them to sustain that work long enough that they get, a good level of stimulation and good level of fatigue and so forth. But I don't want it to go too long. So I'll usually say 60 to 90 seconds. But then again, you're trying to temper that with some people. Maybe I allow them to go a little bit longer because they're not behaving properly. And, we've got to make some adjustments. But I'm very cautious to not go too long with the time under load, and I'll just manipulate that weight until it's within range. So clients that maybe aren't as skilled, I'll let them go slightly longer, but the clients that are doing what I want them to do and are willing and motivated and have the ability, they're going to be more in the 60 to 90 second range. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and we've probably don't have enough time to get into this. And maybe we can discuss this on another podcast, but where someone falls in that range is largely going to be determined by their particular genotype, right? And how quickly and what sort of composition they have in terms of muscle fiber, how quickly they fatigue. I find for me, I will almost always fatigue so as long as the weight is heavy enough at like the 70-second mark on so many exercises. It doesn't matter even if I creep the weight up just like 2 pounds each time, it's always at that point. And is that directly linked to just my genotype? Is that, or again, we can put this off if it's a big topic, right?
Kind of reminds me of, in one of Doug McGuff's, his earlier book, he talked a lot about signature time under load.
That's it.
Sort of that this time under load was sort of find you, that based on kind of what you're saying, whether it's your genotype or just your personal kind of physiology or muscle fiber type, that you will sort of, naturally kind of fall into this certain, time to concentric failure, time under load type of thing. And there's some truth to that, although I think this is an area that's not really well understood. But even back in the day, right before Arthur Jones sold Nautilus, he was doing a lot of research with, some things, and kind of did recognize that whether it was fiber type or whatever was going on, that there was certain individuals that did do better on sort of higher rep ranges or higher time under loads, and some people less. And he kind of believed that the ideal inroad was about 20%. So that in order to inroad your muscles by 20%, some people who fatigue slower required a longer time under load in order to fatigue to that level. And then other people that fatigued very quickly, maybe, didn't require as many reps or as many time under load to get that level of inroad. And these are all interesting concepts. They're not well understood. And I think there's something going on there, but I don't know that anybody really knows exactly what it is. So, anyway, I think this is all good stuff, and it kind of brings me to the end of my discussion on this today. So,
Tim, I'm really impressed. I think we've covered 3.5 bullets today, which is a new record.
It is.
Because we covered repetition ranges and how they correspond with TUL and TCF. We've done that right today. Yeah. I don't think there's more to say on that. So we'll probably start off talking about determination of optimal weight load and resistance level. Is that?
Yeah.
Really
I think
got too much into that.
Yep. That'd probably be the next step. And
fantastic.
Okay.
I know you've got another appointment. So just very quickly, do you want to just tell the listeners how to find out more about you and your services that you might be able to help them with as well?
Yeah, I think they can just reach me through my website, stronglifetraining.com. There's links to contact me. There's the email address, info@stronglifetraining.com. If they go through one of those routes, any questions, any desire to learn more about some of my services, to teach, do workshops, seminars, that kind of thing, we can discuss all of that.
Awesome. I'm, if we were based over near you or even in the same country, Tim, I would be over there in a heartbeat to learn more from you. I think it's just a great opportunity for all of us. And I just really enjoy this. I learned so much just listening to you talk about this stuff and really going back to the fundamentals. So thank you again. And to everyone listening or watching, if you go to the blog post for this or any one of these blog posts, we'll have the entire series in each one. So you'll be able to find all the parts of in each blog post, if that makes sense. And we're continuing to grow the series over time. We have no idea how long that's going to be, but it is going to be epic at this stage. And to find the blog post for this episode and download the PDF transcript if you prefer to read it back, please go to highintensitybusiness.com, search for episode 360. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. This episode is brought to you by ARX. You want to be a successful strength training studio owner. The problem is you aren't able to deliver the safest, most efficient and effective workouts, making it harder for you to attract and retain clients, which makes you feel frustrated. I understand that it can be difficult to differentiate your business without the right tools. ARX's breakthrough adaptive resistance technology uses patented motorized resistance and computer software to give you and your clients the perfect workout every single time. BioFit founder John Zarbok says that ARX is clearly the superior tool to deliver the exercise stimulus. My clients are seeing insane improvements in weeks, not months. I could not fathom running my business without ARX. So here's how you get started. Number 1, go to arxfit.com/HIB to get $500 off your ARX machines. Number 2, book a call with the ARX sales team. And number 3, learn how ARX can help you grow your strength training business. Go to arxfit.com/HIB so you can stop struggling to attract and retain clients and start to grow your strength training business with confidence.